Illinois is often imagined as a land of quiet prairie towns and endless farmland. But beneath that familiar landscape lies a far older and more mysterious story. Across the state, traces of the past still linger. Enigmatic stone walls hidden in forested hills, ancient carvings etched into rock faces, and caves wrapped in legends of river pirates and lost treasure. Some of these places are real archaeological sites left by indigenous cultures that lived here centuries ago. Others survive mostly in local folklore passed down through generations of storytellers and treasure hunters. Together, they form a landscape where history and legend overlap in fascinating ways. These stories may not always have clear answers, but that's part of their power. They remind us that the land we think we know still carries echoes of the unknown. These are the ancient mysteries of Illinois.
Deep in southern Illinois, between the mighty Mississippi River and the Ohio River, a rugged landscape rises from the forests. These ancient ridges are known as the Shawnee Hills, and for generations they have inspired one of the region's most enduring legends, the tale of the lost mines of the Shawnee Hills. It's a story that blends fragments of real history with frontier folklore and a little human greed. According to local tradition, somewhere within these winding hills lies a forgotten mine, possibly rich with silver or another valuable metal, worked long ago and then mysteriously abandoned. To understand why such a legend took hold, you first have to imagine the landscape. The Shawnee Hills are wild and complicated terrain. Sandstone cliffs rise above dense forests, narrow creeks cut through deep valleys, and hidden caves dot the hillsides. Even today, it's easy to lose your sense of direction among the ridges and hollows. Early settlers described the region as beautiful but dangerous, a place where the wilderness seemed to swallow roads, trails, and sometimes entire stories. The origins of the Lost Mine legend stretch back to the early 1700s when French explorers began moving through what was then known as the Illinois country. Among them was a man named Philippe François Renaud, a mining entrepreneur who arrived in the region around 1719 with a charter from the French crown. Renaud was searching for precious metals and established several mining operations in the broader Mississippi Valley. Historical records show that he and his workers, many of them enslaved laborers brought from the Caribbean, did mine lead and other minerals in parts of present-day Illinois and Missouri. But whether Renaud ever discovered silver in the Shawnee Hills is another matter entirely. According to legend, he did. Some versions of the story claim that Renaud found a rich silver deposit somewhere in the hills of what is now Hardin County. The tale says he secretly worked the mine for a short time, extracting ore and smelting it near the Mississippi River. Then, as political tensions and frontier conflicts grew, he supposedly sealed the mine and left the region, hiding its location forever. There is no historical evidence confirming that such a silver mine ever existed. Still, the legend refused to disappear. Throughout the 19th century, prospectors repeatedly attempted to locate the supposed mine. Some dug shallow shafts into hillsides, others searched caves or sifted through creek beds. A few even claimed they had discovered promising clues: old smelter slag, broken tools in rock faces, and pits that looked like abandoned dig sites. The geology of the Shawnee Hills offers a likely explanation. The region is composed largely of sandstone and limestone, rock types that rarely contain significant veins of gold or silver. However, the area does contain lead, iron, and small amounts of other minerals, which could easily have sparked exaggerated reports among early explorers. In other words, the legend may have grown from a small kernel of truth. During the 19th century, prospectors repeatedly attempted to locate the supposed mine. Some dug shallow shafts into hillsides, others searched caves or sifted through creek beds. A few even claimed they had discovered promising clues: old smelter slag, broken tools, or unusual rock formations.
Yet none produced convincing evidence of a hidden treasure.
One location often mentioned in these stories lies within the dramatic rock formations of Garden of the Gods Wilderness inside Shawnee National Forest. The towering sandstone pillars and narrow crevices there certainly look like the kind of place where a secret might hide. In the 1930s, several groups even organized expeditions to search the surrounding hills using maps passed down through local families. But those journeys ended the same way most treasure hunts do, with nothing more than interesting rocks and good campfire stories. Another version of the legend ties the lost mines to the region's indigenous peoples. Some storytellers claim the local Shawnee people once knew about valuable mineral deposits in the hills and deliberately concealed them to keep outsiders from exploiting the land. There's no archaeological evidence supporting that claim, but the idea has persisted in local folklore. Like many treasure legends, the stories eventually took on darker tones. People began telling tales of strange events in the woods, mysterious lights flickering in the distance, caves collapsing just as explorers approached them, or treasure hunters who disappeared without explanation. Some versions even describe a ghostly guardian figure appearing in frontier clothing, warning intruders away from the hidden mine. Of course, historians and geologists view these stories with skepticism. Most likely, the legend formed from a mix of early mining activity, misunderstood geology, and the human tendency to turn uncertainty into myth. But even knowing that, the story still has a powerful hold on people's imaginations. The Shawnee Hills themselves seem almost designed to inspire mystery. The forests stretch for miles, ridges rise and fall like waves across the landscape, caves twist into darkness where sunlight never reaches. It's not hard to imagine that somewhere beneath those hills lies a forgotten tunnel sealed long ago. Modern treasure hunters have searched for the lost mine using everything from metal detectors to ground-penetrating radar. Online forums still trade rumored coordinates and faded hand-drawn maps. So far, none of those searches has uncovered anything that convinces historians, and yet the legend continues. For some people, the story is really about hope, the dream that something extraordinary might still be waiting to be discovered. For others, it's a warning about greed, a reminder that not every mystery should be dug up. If you visit the Shawnee Hills today, you'll find a landscape that feels much the same as it must have centuries ago. Trails wind through the cliffs of Rim Rock National Recreation Trail, the stone shelters of Bell Smith Springs, and the towering formations of Garden of the Gods. Standing on one of those ridges at sunset, looking out over endless forest, it becomes easy to understand why the legend survives. The hills seem to hold their secrets tightly. Perhaps there never was a hidden silver mine. Perhaps the treasure exists only in stories passed from one generation to the next. But in a place as ancient and quiet as the Shawnee Hills, that may be enough. After all, some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. They're meant to be remembered, whispered through the trees, and carried forward by anyone willing to listen. In the quiet countryside of southern Olney in the state of Illinois, a strange story has lingered for decades, one that sits somewhere between legend, curiosity, and controversy. For nearly 40 years, historians, skeptics, and treasure hunters have debated the same question. Was there ever really a place called Burrow's Cave? The story begins in 1982 with a man named Russell E. Burrows. According to his own account, he was hiking through the limestone bluffs along the Little Wabash River when he noticed a narrow opening in the rock. Curious, he squeezed inside. What he claimed to find there was astonishing. Burrows said the opening led into a vast underground cave system, more like a labyrinth than a simple cavern, stretching deep beneath the hills. Inside, he claimed, were hundreds of carved stones and unusual artifacts. Some appeared to be made of slate, etched with figures of warriors, rulers, animals, and mysterious symbols. But the most extraordinary part of his story was the writing.
Burrow said the cave walls and many of the stones carried inscriptions that resembled Egyptian hieroglyphs, Phoenician characters, and even Latin words. To him, this collection of symbols pointed to something revolutionary, evidence that ancient Mediterranean travelers had reached North America thousands of years before Christopher Columbus. It was a bold claim, almost impossible to believe, and yet it spread quickly. At first, the story circulated quietly among enthusiasts of alternative archaeology, but during the 1990s, photographs and rubbings of the stones began appearing in books and magazines. Interest exploded. Some people believed the artifacts might reveal a forgotten chapter of ancient history, perhaps proof that seafarers from the Mediterranean once crossed the Atlantic and settled in the American Midwest. Yet from the beginning, there was a serious problem. No one else had ever seen the cave. Burroughs refused to reveal its location. He said he feared the cave would be destroyed by looters or seized by the government if its existence became public. According to him, he had even sealed the entrance after removing some artifacts. Without coordinates or a map, researchers had no way to verify the site. The secrecy created decades of speculation. Supporters argued that Burroughs was protecting something historically important. They pointed to the carvings on the stones as evidence of ancient influences, images that some believed resembled Egyptian deities, crosses associated with early Christianity, or faces with Mediterranean features. Others suggested the artifacts hinted at a mixture of cultures, possibly combining Phoenician, Greek, and early Christian symbolism. Professional archaeologists, however, were deeply skeptical. When linguists examined photographs of the inscriptions, they noticed serious inconsistencies. The supposed hieroglyphs did not follow real Egyptian grammar. The Phoenician letters often appeared incorrect or out of order. The Latin phrases sometimes contained spelling mistakes or combinations that would make little sense to an ancient writer. Even the surface weathering of the stones raised questions. The patina, the thin natural layer that usually forms on objects over long periods, did not look consistent with artifacts thousands of years old. To many experts, the evidence suggested something far simpler: modern carvings. Still, Burroughs never changed his story. Until his death in 2014, he continued to defend his discovery. Over the years, he displayed, sold, or traded hundreds of carved stones, insisting they all came from the hidden cave. Because the cave itself was never located, his claims could neither be proven nor completely disproven. Over time, the story of Burroughs' cave became something larger than an archaeological puzzle. It became a reflection of human curiosity, the powerful desire to believe that history still holds undiscovered secrets.
Even today, if you visit the countryside near Olney, you will not find signs pointing to a legendary cave. There is no official archaeological site and no museum exhibit confirming its existence. The supposed location remains unknown, buried somewhere beneath farmland, wooded ravines, and limestone bluffs. And yet, the legend survives. Collectors still claim to own what are called Burroughs cave stones. Many are palm-sized pieces of slate engraved with faces, animals, or strange symbols. Some carvings appear crude, while others show surprising artistic detail. Whether they were carved centuries ago or only decades ago remains impossible to determine with certainty. Interestingly, the Midwest has seen similar controversies before. Various carved stones, sometimes referred to as Illinois tablets, have surfaced over the past century. Most archaeologists have dismissed them as modern creations, though they continue to intrigue mystery enthusiasts. What we do know for certain is that ancient civilizations did thrive in this region long before European arrival. Just across the state near Collinsville lies the site of Cahokia Mounds, once the largest and most complex urban center in prehistoric North America. Its enormous earth mounds and wide trade networks show that indigenous cultures here were already highly sophisticated. But despite extensive research, no credible evidence connects Cahokia or any Native American culture to artifacts like the ones Burroughs described, which leaves the central mystery unresolved. If the cave never existed, where did the hundreds of stones come from? Did Burroughs carve them himself? That would have required years of work. Supporters argue that such a large collection would be difficult for one person to produce. Skeptics counter that modern tools, molds, and carving techniques could easily create large numbers of similar objects. Without the cave itself, the debate may never truly end. All that remains are scattered artifacts, photographs, and a story that continues to fascinate people who hear it. And perhaps that is why the Burroughs Cave mystery still endures. Stand on the wooded bluffs near Olney today, looking out over the quiet Illinois landscape, and it is easy to imagine hidden caves beneath the limestone hills. The terrain is full of ravines, sinkholes, and small caverns, many of them only partially explored. Could something unusual still be hidden underground? Maybe. Or maybe the real mystery was never in the cave at all. Maybe it lies in the story itself. How one man's claim sparked decades of debate, belief, and skepticism. A reminder that sometimes the most powerful mysteries are not the ones we solve, but the ones that keep us wondering long after the facts have faded. If you want, I can also turn this into a stronger YouTube narration script, more suspenseful and optimized for viewer retention.
High above the slow-moving waters of the Ohio River in southern Illinois sits one of the most dramatic natural landmarks in the region, Cave-in Rock. From a distance, it looks like the cliff itself has been hollowed out by some enormous force. The cave opens directly toward the river, a massive arch carved into the limestone bluff. The entrance stretches roughly 55 feet across, forming a shadowy chamber that seems to swallow the daylight behind it. Today, it's a scenic stop inside Cave-in Rock State Park, visited by hikers, campers, and travelers exploring the forests of southern Illinois. But the cave's quiet beauty hides a far darker and more colorful past. For more than 2 centuries, this place has been tied to stories of river pirates, outlaws, hidden treasure, and frontier violence. And like many places along the early American frontier, the truth eventually blended with legend until it became difficult to separate one from the other. Long before the stories began, nature created the cave itself. Over thousands of years, shifting currents of the Ohio River slowly eroded the limestone bluff, carving out the hollow chamber we see today. Indigenous peoples living in the region likely knew the cave well. It may have served as a temporary shelter or a natural landmark along ancient travel routes that followed the river valley. When European explorers arrived in the 1700s, they quickly noticed the cave's striking appearance. It soon appeared on maps as a recognizable landmark for anyone navigating the Ohio River. But the cave's most notorious chapter began near the end of the 18th century. In the late 1700s, the Ohio River was one of the most important transportation routes in North America. Flatboats and keelboats carried settlers, traders, and goods downstream toward the Mississippi River and the growing city of New Orleans. Where commerce traveled, criminals often followed. Because Cave-in Rock overlooked a busy stretch of river while remaining hidden among steep bluffs, it became a convenient hideout for outlaw gangs. From the cave's entrance, watchers could easily spot approaching boats while staying concealed from anyone traveling below. One of the earliest groups associated with the cave was led by Samuel Mason. Mason had once served as a militia officer during the American Revolutionary War, but by the 1790s he had turned to crime. His gang operated along the Ohio River, robbing travelers and river traders. Some historical accounts suggest the group used Cave-in Rock as a temporary base during their activities in the region. Another set of notorious figures sometimes linked to the cave were Micaiah Big Harp and Wiley Little Harp, often remembered as the Harp brothers. They were among the most feared criminals on the early American frontier. In the late 1790s, they traveled across Kentucky, Tennessee, and Illinois, committing brutal murders and robberies. While folklore frequently places them at Cave-in Rock, historians believe they may have passed through the area rather than using it as a permanent hideout. Still, the connection between the cave and these violent outlaws helped cement its reputation.
After Mason's gang collapsed around 1800, the cave reportedly attracted other criminals. Counterfeiters, smugglers, and small bands of river pirates are said to have used it as a meeting place or temporary refuge. Stories spread quickly along the river. Travelers told tales of bandits signaling passing boats with false offers of trade, then robbing them once they came ashore. Some stories described hidden caches of stolen goods buried somewhere within the cave or along the nearby bluffs. Whether those stories were exaggerated or not, they were powerful enough to turn Cave in Rock into one of the most infamous places along the early American frontier. As the 19th century progressed, law enforcement and growing settlements made large-scale river piracy far more difficult. By the 1820s and 1830s, the cave's criminal era had largely ended, but the stories had already taken on a life of their own. Visitors began arriving simply to see the legendary hideout they had read about or heard described by river travelers. Writers and journalists included the cave in travel accounts of the American frontier, helping transform it from a criminal refuge into a historical curiosity. Over time, folklore layered new mysteries onto the site. Locals began talking about ghostly lights inside the cave at night. Some claimed to hear strange echoes or voices carried by the wind. Others believed treasure stolen by river pirates had been hidden somewhere in the cave's floor or buried in the nearby hills. Treasure hunters occasionally searched the area, convinced that gold or silver from the outlaw days was still waiting to be discovered. No confirmed treasure has ever been found. In the 20th century, the cave's reputation shifted once again. In 1929, the surrounding land was preserved as Cave in Rock State Park, protecting both the natural formation and the historical stories connected to it. Today, visitors can walk down a winding trail from the bluff above and step directly into the cavern. The moment you enter, the temperature drops and the outside sounds soften into echoes against the limestone walls. Sunlight spills through the wide entrance, illuminating the stone in warm shades of gold and gray. The river moves slowly past the mouth of the cave, just as it did centuries ago when flatboats drifted by carrying settlers toward the western frontier. Standing there, it's easy to imagine how the cave once felt to travelers on the river, both a landmark and a possible danger. Cave in Rock remains one of the most atmospheric places in Illinois. Families picnic on the bluffs where river pirates may once have watched the water below. Hikers explore the cave's interior where outlaw gangs once gathered in the shadows. And every so often, someone still arrives with a metal detector or a shovel, hoping to uncover a lost cache of treasure from the cave's darker days. Whether any treasure was ever hidden there is impossible to say. But the real fascination of Cave in Rock may lie in something deeper than buried gold. Places like this remind us how the American frontier was shaped not only by facts, but by stories. Stories passed from traveler to traveler until they became part of the landscape itself. Stand inside the cave today and look out toward the Ohio River, and you can almost see the lanterns of old riverboats drifting past in the darkness. The cave has watched them all come and go, and somehow it's still keeping a few of its secrets.
Hidden in the thick forests of southern Illinois, not far from the small town of Chester, there is a quiet ravine that holds one of the state's most fascinating traces of ancient life. It's called Piney Creek Ravine State Natural Area, and at first glance, it doesn't seem unusual at all. The landscape looks like countless other places in the rugged hills of southern Illinois. A narrow creek winds between sandstone cliffs. Oak and hickory trees stretch overhead, filling the air with rustling leaves and birdsong. Hikers often pass through without realizing that something remarkable is hidden here. Along one weathered sandstone wall of the ravine, faint shapes begin to appear if you look carefully. They are petroglyphs, images carved directly into the rock by ancient hands. These carvings are among the oldest known rock art in Illinois.
Archaeologists believe many of them were created hundreds of years ago, likely during the late Woodland and Mississippian cultural periods, roughly between AD 600 and 1400. That means the people who made them lived in this region long before European settlers arrived, and during the same broad era when the great Native American city of Cahokia Mounds was flourishing across the Mississippi River near Collinsville. The images themselves are both simple and mysterious. Some are easy to recognize. You can make out shapes that resemble human figures, deer, birds, and snakes. Others are harder to interpret. Circles, crosses, spirals, and abstract geometric patterns that may have carried symbolic meaning. One striking carving appears to show a human-like figure with its arms stretched outward, a posture that some researchers think could represent a spiritual leader, perhaps a shaman or ceremonial figure. Nearby is another image resembling a long serpent winding across the rock surface. Standing in front of the panel today, it becomes clear that these carvings were not random marks scratched into stone. Creating them required patience and effort. Each line had to be carefully pecked into the sandstone using stone tools, a slow process that suggests the images were important to the people who made them. Archaeologists have documented more than 100 individual carvings scattered across several panels in the ravine, making Piney Creek one of the most significant rock art sites in Illinois. Time has not been gentle with them. Centuries of rain, wind, and erosion have softened many of the lines, leaving some figures barely visible. But they are still there, and when your eyes adjust to the rock face, the carvings slowly emerge, one shape after another, like faint echoes from the past. The location of the site may not be accidental. The carvings appear in a secluded section of the ravine, near a flowing creek and sheltered by tall cliffs. In many indigenous traditions across North America, places where water, stone, and isolation meet were considered spiritually powerful. Rock art sites often appear in similar settings, suggesting these locations may have been used for ceremonies, storytelling, or spiritual reflection. Some of the symbols at Piney Creek also resemble designs found at other rock art sites throughout the Midwest, in places like Missouri, Kentucky, and Tennessee. This similarity hints that the artists may have been part of a wider cultural tradition, sharing ideas and symbolic imagery across large distances. Researchers have even noted how sunlight interacts with the carvings. At certain times of day, the morning light strikes the cliff at an angle that makes particular figures stand out, while others fade into shadow. Some have speculated that this effect might have been intentional, perhaps marking seasonal events like solstices or equinoxes, but there is no clear evidence that the site functioned as an astronomical calendar. Like many ancient sites, Piney Creek leaves room for interpretation.
Before it received legal protection, parts of the rock art were damaged by graffiti and vandalism. Some carvings were chipped or scratched by visitors hoping to take a piece of history home. It wasn't until the late 20th century that the site began receiving serious archaeological attention and conservation efforts. Today, the area is managed by the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, and access to the most sensitive petroglyph panels is restricted in order to protect them. Reaching the ravine still requires a bit of effort. Visitors must follow narrow trails through the forest, crossing small streams and rocky ledges. When you finally arrive, the carvings are not immediately obvious. The rock wall blends into the landscape until you slow down and begin to notice the faint lines. Then, suddenly, the shapes appear. A face here, a circle there, a winding figure stretching across the stone. It almost feels as though the rock reveals them gradually, as if deciding when you're ready to see them. For many people, that moment is deeply moving. You can't help wondering about the people who carved those marks long ago. What stories did they tell here? What beliefs guided their hands? Modern descendants of tribes historically connected to the region, including the Shawnee, Miami, and Illinois Confederation peoples, often view landscapes like Piney Creek as part of a much larger spiritual geography, where the natural world and human life were never truly separate. From that perspective, the carvings may not have been meant for future archaeologists or tourists at all. They may have been messages intended for the land itself. Today, Piney Creek Ravine remains one of Illinois' most atmospheric historical sites. It isn't as monumental as Cahokia, and it lacks the controversy of stories like the so-called Burrow's Cave legend. Instead, it offers something quieter and more personal. Here, history is not preserved in towering monuments or buried cities. It lives in faint lines carved into stone, simple marks left behind by people who once stood in this ravine and wanted to leave proof that they had been here. If you stand there long enough, watching sunlight filter through the trees and across the rock face, you may realize something important. Not every mystery demands an explanation. Some simply invite us to listen, to the land, to the past, and to the quiet voices that still echo through places like Piney Creek Ravine.
If you travel through the forested hills of southern Illinois, especially along the winding roads of Shawnee National Forest, you might notice something unusual hidden among the trees. On certain ridge lines, piles of stone form long, curving walls. At first, they look like nothing more than scattered rocks, but when you step closer, the pattern becomes clear. The stones are arranged deliberately, forming low barriers that stretch across narrow hilltops. These structures are often called the stone forts of southern Illinois, and for more than a century they have puzzled historians, hikers, and archaeologists alike. No one left written records explaining who built them or exactly why they were constructed, yet their placement and design suggest they were important to the people who made them. Many of these stone enclosures sit on high ridges overlooking valleys or waterways. The walls are typically built from local limestone or sandstone gathered nearby and stacked into curved lines that follow the natural contours of the land. In several cases, the walls extend for hundreds of feet, leaving only a single narrow opening that could have served as an entrance. Because of their shape and location, early settlers in the 1800s assumed they were ancient fortifications. That idea is how they received the name stone forts. Today, archaeologists know the story is more complicated. Several well-known examples can still be seen at places such as Millstone Bluff, Giant City State Park, and the site known as Stone Fort Site near the village of Stone Fort. Although each location is slightly different, the structures share a similar layout: stone walls positioned across narrow ridge tops, creating enclosed spaces that overlook the surrounding landscape. For years, the biggest question was their age. Some early writers speculated wildly, suggesting the walls might date back thousands of years before known Native American cultures. Modern archaeology, however, offers a more grounded explanation. Evidence from nearby artifacts and habitation areas indicates that many of these sites were used during the late Woodland and Mississippian periods, roughly between AD 700 and 1400. That places them within the era of the region's indigenous societies, long before European settlement, but well within the time frame of Native American cultures that lived throughout the Mississippi and Ohio river valleys. In fact, one nearby center of civilization was the enormous city of Cahokia Mounds, near present-day Collinsville. At its height around AD 1050 to 1200, Cahokia was the largest urban settlement north of Mexico. Although the stone walls of southern Illinois are smaller and far less elaborate than Cahokia's earthworks, they may have been part of the same broad cultural landscape. But what exactly were they for? Despite the name fort, archaeologists are not entirely convinced these structures were primarily defensive. Excavations inside many of the enclosures have revealed surprisingly little evidence of long-term habitation. There are usually no remains of houses, storage pits, or large quantities of tools or weapons. In many cases, the enclosed space is relatively small, too small to shelter a large community. That has led researchers to consider other possibilities.
Some believe the walls may have marked ceremonial or gathering places rather than military strongholds. The elevated ridges where they appear would have offered dramatic views of the surrounding forests and horizons, making them meaningful locations for rituals, seasonal gatherings, or trade meetings. Others think the structures could have served multiple purposes over time. A ridgetop enclosure might initially have been built as a sacred or symbolic boundary. Later groups may have reused it as a lookout or temporary refuge during periods of conflict. Ancient sites often evolve this way, gaining new meanings as different generations encounter them. One of the most intriguing examples is the site at Millstone Bluff. There, archaeologists have discovered not only a stone wall, but also evidence of a later Mississippian village that once stood on the bluff. Petroglyphs, carved images of animals, human figures, and geometric symbols, are etched into nearby rock surfaces, suggesting the location held cultural or spiritual significance. Standing on that bluff today, surrounded by forest stretching in every direction, it's easy to imagine why people chose the spot. The ridge rises high above the surrounding valleys, and the wind carries the sounds of the forest far below. It feels like a place meant for watching the land. Over the years, local folklore has added its own layers to the mystery. Stories circulate about hidden tunnels beneath the stone walls, strange lights appearing among the rocks at night, or lost peoples who built a defensive network across the hills. More imaginative theories have even linked the structures to lost civilizations or ancient visitors from distant lands. There is no evidence supporting those ideas. Archaeologists are confident the walls were built by indigenous peoples of the region, using local stone and traditional labor. What remains uncertain is the exact purpose each site served. Today, many of these locations are protected within parks and forest preserves. Visitors hiking through Shawnee National Forest can still find the remains of these walls, though they often appear modest at first glance, low rows of moss-covered rock partially hidden beneath leaves and trees. Yet when you pause and really look, the effort behind them becomes clear. Each stone had to be carried and placed by hand, hundreds, sometimes thousands of them. The construction would have required cooperation, planning, and time. Whoever built these structures believed they were worth the effort. Standing beside one of the old ridge walls today can feel strangely powerful. There are few signs explaining exactly what you're seeing, no definitive story carved into the landscape. Instead, there is only the quiet forest, the wind moving through the trees, and a line of stones that has remained in place for centuries. The stone forts of southern Illinois may never reveal all their secrets, but they remind us of something important. Long before modern roads and towns appeared, people were shaping this landscape in ways we are only beginning to understand.